Adventure on the Plains by Jonathan Taylor. Read by Jonathan Taylor. Chapter 3. The Fire. Jack soon had improved greatly in the printing shop, and by the end of 4 months' work at the shop, he could almost work as well as Mr. Mullock. He could do it with great proficiency, too. Dale, on the other hand, was not doing very well. He would argue a great deal more with James than he should have, and many times with Jack as well. And as Jack kept improving in the business of printing, it just made Dale jealous to see how Mr. Mullock was growing to like Jack for his hard work and his diligence. Dale knew that when Jack's apprenticeship was over, Jack could easily be hired by James or any other printing shop, as there was a great demand in that time for printers. But his prospect, on the other hand, was bleak, as he had no education and no experience in any field. Over time, the jealousy grew in Dale, as Jack was gaining in knowledge of the printing business. Now, an apprenticeship in the 1800s was when a father would hire a person to teach his son the skills of that particular business. It could last from 2 to 4 years of mentoring, and once the son signed the contract, he was under law to stay with it for the period of time agreed upon, and in exchange for the skills he was taught, he had to work for no pay. Sometimes the son would live in the shop, and other times, if his house was close, he could go back after work. That is what Jack did. He would work at the shop from 7:15 in the morning to about 4:30 in the afternoon, and then have supper at 5 o'clock. After supper, he would usually work in the garden or play some baseball until bedtime. Thus, Jack was learning many skills, like diligence and perseverance. It was 1 year after working at the printing shop that an incident occurred that changed Jack's plans entirely. Jack, as usual, left the shop at 4:30 and went back home. Dale had stayed out longer than usual to sell the last few papers, and by the time he was back at the shop, it was getting dark. James was upstairs working on some paperwork when Dale came back. Dale had lit the lamp to look for his lunchbox and thought he had shut it off, but he hadn't shut the switch far enough. He had left it on the stack of papers. When he left the shop, he slammed the door, and the lamp crashed to the floor and caught the papers on fire. Soon smoke had filled the air, and James, while he was working, started to smell smoke. "What's that smell?" he said to himself. "Smells like something I know." He got up and opened the door, and smoke filled the room, and flames were traveling up the stairs. "By thunder," he said, "it's a fire." He grabbed his important papers, opened the window, and climbed down to the ground. And by this time, the fire had spread to the whole house, and he heard the fire wagon coming down the road with its bells jingling. They pulled up at the shop and grabbed their buckets and started pouring water on the fire. After half an hour, the fire was finally put out. James was too stunned to speak as he watched the fire. "Whoever did this will find themselves in a great deal of trouble," he finally said. "Fortunately, we have come before it got too out of control, and it didn't do as much damage as it could have," the fire chief said. "How did it happen?" "I don't know. I was upstairs working when I smelled smoke, and when I opened the door, I saw it was a fire, so I got over there mighty quick." "Well, I'll have an investigation done in the morning as to the cause of the fire. But for now, you'll need a place to stay until the damage is repaired." "Yeah, do you know of a place I could stay?" The fire chief thought for a minute. "The Horse and Pig Bed and Breakfast, HPBB, is my favorite. They seem to have decent prices and tasty food." "I'll go check it out. Where's it located?" "On 134 Pepper Street." "Well, I'll best be going, and tomorrow I'll come back to check into the situation." Soon the fire wagon left, and Mullock went to check out at the bed and breakfast. He soon came to a lively old inn, with people sitting at a big great table having a rather late supper. He walked up to the counter. "Ho, chap!" bawled out the jolly cook, with an enormous basting spoon in one hand. "Hi there, man," shouted James, having to shout over the lively conversations going on. "I reckon you want some food, don't you?" "I sure do," he said. "Oh, come on, quit your sadness. This is a jolly old place." He jumped up on the table and started blowing away on his harmonica, while everyone clapped to music. James went and grabbed some pancakes, dragged the syrup jug with him to a corner, sat down, and started munching. Chapter 4. Fired. Jack woke up to see that it was already getting late in the morning. He dressed and went downstairs to find the family getting ready for breakfast. The smell of cornbread filled the room. "Good morning, Jack," said his father. "I hear that Mullock's shop caught fire, and I hope you had no part in it." "Oh, no, he's always been kind to me, and I'd have no reason to do such a thing." "I didn't think you had. Now let's have breakfast and check into this later." Presently breakfast was finished, and Jack and his father walked down to the printing shop. It was a nice sunny day, with the usual sounds of Philadelphia in the air. When they arrived at the shop, there was smoke still drifting in the air, and the whole back of the shop was black and burnt, along with part of the roof. Inside, the two found James Mullock talking with the fire chief and the sheriff. Dale Billings was bent down searching the ground, and the smell of smoke was thick in the air. Soon James looked up to see them, and walked over. "Hi, John," he called out. "Hi, James. I truly am sorry to see your shop in this state." "Yes, the press is mostly ruined, and of course the paper is burnt, so it will take a while to repair the damages, not to mention the money needed." "So how did it happen?" "Well, I was in my office upstairs when I smelled smoke. I opened the door and saw flames and smoke everywhere, so I quickly climbed out the window and lowered myself down the rain pipe. After that, the fire wagon came and put it out." "Have you found any clues as to the starting of it?" "Why, look at this," said the fire chief, and he held up a broken lantern. "This must be what caused the fire." "Well, if that beats all," blurted out Dale Billings. "I'm sure I saw Jack with that lantern last night. He must have left it and didn't turn it off. Pretty careful, if you ask me. And furthermore, after I finished my rounds, I went back home, so Jack would have been the last one there before the fire. He probably left the lantern on when he left, and it crashed to the floor when he shut the door." "Well, I was using the lantern last night, but I'm sure I didn't turn it off. I turned it off before leaving." "Yeah, likely story. You were the last person there before the fire, and you were using the lantern, so the evidence is against you." "I know Jack was using the lantern last night," said James Mullock, "so it seems to point to him as a firebug. But I know Jack is usually quite careful, and it don't seem like him to do such a thing." Just then Farmer Brown came down the street to the shop. "Well, hello. I'm sorry to see your business in this state." "Thanks, but right now we are trying to decide who could have started it." "You found out who could have done it?" "It was either Jack Bedford or Dale Billings, and the evidence seems to point against Jack as the culprit, since he was the last person before the fire. Any testimony you might have in this case would be gladly considered." "I'm afraid that in this case I know nothing about the matter. But in my own dealings I do not altogether regard Dale Billings with much trust. There were many times in which he caused much trouble when I was gardening. He would dump water on me when I was weeding, and steal vegetables and the like. Not to mention the time when Jack caught him stealing, and the two messed up my garden in a fight." "Well, it sounds like he has caused you much trouble, and some to me as well. But the evidence he gave is the most logical in this case. So, if Jack does not have any evidence for himself, then he will have to be expelled, much to my own grief. I did use the lantern, but I'm quite sure that I turned it off before I left. Honestly, I would have never done it on purpose." "Does anyone else have anything to say?" No one spoke. "Then I am afraid, Jack, that you are fired." Chapter 5. An Advertisement. Jack and his father left the shop and started for home. Jack had a heavy heart since his hopes of completing the apprenticeship were gone. He hadn't really considered any other job. A week later, Jack went smack into, of all people, Dale Billings. He was headed to the general store to get supplies. "Hey, can't you watch where you're going?" said Jack, and the two recognized each other. "Well, I might have known, if it ain't the firebug." "You know I didn't start that fire," retorted Jack. "Well, who cares? All the evidence is against you." That was too much for Jack. The two stepped in the dirt and started slugging. Jack got into the first lick, which was a considerable advantage, but Dale was a big feller and shook it off and tagged right into him. Soon they had enough and parted, with Dale threatening to call the sheriff. Jack went into the store to finish his errand. When he was going to leave, he saw an advertisement on the ad board. He got closer and read it as follows. "Notice: the Santa Fe wagon train is hiring an assistant for the scout of the wagon train heading out of Independence, Missouri, on the 4th of June. The pay will be $2 a day. The applicant will need to be in Independence on the 2nd to get acquainted with the work, and you will need to have your own horse for the work. Signed, Jeff Thompson." "Well, this sounds like something neat. What great adventures I could have being a scout." Just then the store owner saw Jack reading that and he walked over. "Hello, are you interested in this advertisement?" asked the store owner. "Yes, it sounds like very interesting work, and I don't have any job right now." "Good, then how about you take the job? From what I hear, it will be hard work. It won't be exactly easy. But I'm sure you could get lots of experience riding horses and shooting with a colt." "But I haven't ridden a horse or shot a colt before. Wouldn't they want someone with more experience?" "Well, I'm sure the scout could teach you if you want to learn, but you will need to find your own horse, saddle, colt, and other such gear." "Well, I'll go back and ask my folks first." Jack went back home and told them about the advertisement. They thought it would be a good job for Jack. "There's nothing for you to do around here, so you might as well take the job," said his mother. Just then his father stepped into the house after finishing early at the bank. "Father, I found an advertisement at the general store requesting someone to help the scout of a wagon train. It is headed on the Santa Fe route from Independence, Missouri on the 4th, and the pay will be $2 a day. But I will need to find my own horse and gear. Do you think I should take the offer?" "Well, I don't know why not. It would give you something to do. Why don't you take it?" The next few days were busy for Jack. He found Jeff Thompson's address and sent a letter to him, stating that he would be there by the end of the week. He found a gun belt and bought 2 Colt revolvers. Then he and his father started looking for a good horse. Finally, they found a fine-looking horse that 2 newcomers to town wanted to sell at a cheap price. They were dressed in broad hats, red shirts, over which they wore jackets with silver buttons, leather breeches, and high boots. The horse was a gray purebred Mustang, not a car, with a black mane and tail. It was a fine horse, with what looked to be Mexican blood in him. After some bargaining, they agreed on $200 for the price, which Jack paid. Then Jack bought a saddle and bridle at the wheelwright shop. The saddle was made in the Texan fashion, being very heavy with a high peak and cantle. When Jack first tried to ride, he felt very clumsy and had a hard time staying on. But after a few days riding, Jack started to get accustomed to it. His mother had packed some food for his journey to Independence. So, the next day, Jack was ready to start. After many farewells, Jack climbed into the saddle and started off. He gave one last wave, and then rode over the hill on his way to Independence, Missouri.